Running's a high impact activity. We know that already, that's obvious. And with any high impact activity, it's easy to overdo volume and get injured. And that's whether you're experienced or not. However, what you might not know is that all running techniques are not created equal. And depending on the style of running you use, you can actually modify it to take the load off a certain injury, or to use it to modify your technique to actually recover from an injury. For example, when you forefoot strike, you're actually putting more load on your calf and your foot and taking some load off your knee. Than when you heel strike, you're putting a little bit more load on your shin and your knee and taking load off your calf and your foot. So depending what's injured, you might want to modify or change your running technique even temporarily, just to kind of get back into that activity. Now, besides that, there is still a form that would be considered like good technique. And for most people, that is a higher cadence or more steps per minute than you're used to taking. And it's about 15 to 20 steps more than the average runner actually takes. So we know that there is a good form, and that is within 180 steps a minute. So you want to get your cadence to, or your how many steps you take in a minute, between 170 and 190. So you've got a little bit of a buffer there. And why this is important is because it will shorten your stride and it'll bring your foot underneath you more, so that you're at more of a mechanical advantage for running. Now, you can compare it to jumping as to how this works. So if you were to jump up and land, you're going to land with your bent knees, bend your hips, and land more on the front part of your foot. And that's to absorb the force of landing when you jump. And we want to do a similar thing when you're running, because we know it's high impact, so you want to absorb the force of your running to prevent injuries and to give your body that mechanical advantage. So to do that, you're going to bring your foot underneath your body, similar as to when you're landing jumping. You wouldn't jump and land with your feet out in front of you or with a long, almost braking type mechanism on, because that would increase the force and that would hurt more. So we're trying to mimic that running, that you're bringing your feet underneath you a little bit more. And really the simplest way to do that is to get that cadence up. It will increase the amount of steps you take in a minute and decrease your stride length, bringing your foot underneath you. And that is to run at that same speed. So you don't want to actually increase how fast you're running to increase your cadence. It's got to be the same speed, 180 steps a minute, give or take a few, with a shorter stride length. Now, there's really, really easy ways to do this. One is to run to a metronome. You can download any metronome app to your phone and just run to that rhythm. Or Spotify actually created a really easy way to do this with playlists. You can actually search in Spotify for running cadence, or run 170 to 180 or 175 to 180, and you'll find full playlists that are at that beat, and you can just run to that rhythm. Now, the second consideration that you want to think about when you're running is actually landing quiet. So that is to put as little force through the ground in a hard shock as possible. So when you're running, you want to land so your foot just sort of grazes the ground and comes around, as opposed to lands hard, lands hard, lands hard. And that will do two things for you. One, it'll actually increase your efficiency, but it's going to put your muscles and your joints at a force advantage to absorb the shock of running, so you just don't bang into the ground, because that's what causes injuries. So the third thing that you'd want to consider would be your muscle conditioning, and that's really just your muscle strength and endurance for running. Whether you're new to running, or you're coming off an injury, or you're coming from another sport, you just have to consider, are your muscles conditioned in the way that you need them to run? As in, do they have the muscle endurance to get you through the distance of the run that you're trying to accomplish? Do they have the strength capacity to do that as well? You might be able to evaluate that on your own, and that's great. If you have any questions about that, I would consult a healthcare professional to do a proper assessment prior to your run and say, you might need to get this muscle strength up, or work on this before you actually go out and do a bunch of volume and running. But that's generally it. That'll give you a few tips to get started. Good luck and have fun running.